All right, welcome everyone to Let's Talk Live. I will be your host and moderator for tonight while Father Chris is out, so thank you for joining us. My name is Noelle. Just a few reminders before we get started. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. We're also here live on Zoom. If you're on social media and you want to join us on Zoom, you can find the link in the description for this video and you can join. This is an interactive program, so you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and leave your comments throughout. If you are watching on social media, you can leave your comments there as well, and we'll get to some of those later in the program. I just ask that you, as always, please be respectful and polite in the comments, but we do encourage you to share where you're joining from. And we also ask that you invite others to join MyOCN community. We are a welcoming community available any day, anytime, and anywhere. And membership to MyOCN community is always free. And the Orthodox Christian Network is a 501c3 corporation and a 100% donor-supported ministry. So, of course, we appreciate you who support us financially, that make these programs possible and keep them free. And we also appreciate all of you who join us for our programs and who engage with us. If you want to share this video with your friends and family or any of our other videos, they will be available as a recording on myocn.net and also on our social media sites after the program. So without further ado, I will get into our opening prayer and then I'll introduce our guest for this evening. Heavenly King, Comforter, the Spirit of Truth, everywhere present and filling all things, treasure, blessings, and giver of life, come and dwell in us, cleanse us of every stain, and save our souls, O gracious one. So our guest today is Michael Sider-Rose, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Orthodox Volunteer Corps. Michael grew up in Philadelphia, where he had visions of becoming the next Mike Schmidt, even though his Little League slugging percentage never quite reached triple digits. After college, Michael attended the University of Pittsburgh for a PhD in history. And 8 years later, he emerged from the library with a completed dissertation on religion and politics in post-World War II America. Keen to link the academy and the community, he then took a position with Chicago Semester, which is a faith-based off-campus experiential learning program. Michael worked there from 2000 to 2006 and enjoyed it so much that he decided to create a similar venture in Pittsburgh as part of the Pittsburgh Project. He was director of Pittsburgh Semester from 2007 through 2008. In January of 2009, Michael joined the Coro Center for Civic Leadership in Pittsburgh, where he served for nearly 13 years. And for the past 10 years, Michael has volunteered extensively with the Neighborhood Resilience Project, where he also serves on the board. In his spare time, Michael enjoys moving, running, biking, not moving, reading, and sampling food from around the globe, the perfect balance of moving and not moving. He has the great privilege of being married to Randy Maria and father to Anna, Molly, Eliza, and Tobiah. So welcome, Michael, to the program. We're very happy to have you today. And I will let our guests know a little bit about Orthodox Volunteer Corps, which is our topic for this evening. For over 2 years, a team of Orthodox leaders from across the country has been developing a new ministry for our church, the Orthodox Volunteer Corps. OVC is a full-time 10-month program to develop young adult Orthodox leaders through hands-on domestic service placements, intensive leadership training, communal living, and faith formation. OVC became the newest official agency of the Assembly of Bishops in October, has 2 full-time staff, and will launch our inaugural cohort of participants this fall in Pittsburgh. So welcome, Michael, again to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I will start off with a very basic question, which is, how did OVC form?
Yeah. So in your intro, when you mentioned that it was over 2 years ago that folks began working, the start of this work was a meeting in New York City in September of 2019. So in some ways, it feels like a world away. It was a pre-COVID world. I'm in Pittsburgh now, where it's pretty chilly. It was a warm fall day that we all gathered. The Assembly of Bishops called a bunch of people together from across the country, Orthodox leaders together, to think about the question of homelessness and what can the church do to address the problem of homelessness. And at that meeting, as people gathered and talked about that topic, some things emerged. And there were these ideas that emerged that, as you know, if we're going to think about homelessness, we need folks who are going to be able to address the particular challenges there. That they'll need to understand the different dimensions of homelessness. They'll need to understand, the history of that problem. They'll need to understand, what are societal issues, what are structural issues that are involved in that, maybe what are policy questions that are related to homelessness. There's a lot of detail that matters, right? You need to understand the complexity of that issue. That's important, right? Sort of taking a strategic approach. But at the same time, what we were reflecting on is that we need people who have the heart. We need people who are able to see every single individual who is without a home as a brother and a sister in Christ, every single person who is an icon of Christ. And if we relate to every single person who is homeless in that way, it's a fundamentally different way than other kinds of programs to address homelessness, right? It's a fundamentally different way than you might think of sort of like a transactional approach to addressing homelessness. It's a fundamentally different way than many of the ways of the world of addressing homelessness, right? So we were thinking about this question, right? How do you address homelessness in a way that is thoughtful and strategic, but it also deeply heart-filled, right? And as we reflected on that, we thought, that's relevant for homelessness, but it's relevant for any kind of issue, any sort of social issue, right? Maybe you're thinking about how do we help support immigrants who are struggling? How do we support, say, someone who doesn't want to have an abortion, but then they've got this child? How do we care for that mother and that child, right? There's all kinds of social issues. And with any of those, we've got to have people who've got the head and the heart to address them. We've got to have Orthodox leaders who can address it in that holistic way. And as we reflected on this, folks began to use the same language. We have to train people, right, to be prepared. And what do we need to train? What sort of effort do we need? Well, maybe what we need is an Orthodox Volunteer Corps. And what was so beautiful about this moment is that people from across the country who had not spoken to each other before were using the very same language and saying we need the very same thing. So in that meeting that was at first about homelessness, there was this, in some sense, even bigger project that began that would certainly develop folks who could speak about that issue, but so many others. So the Assembly of Bishops then said, all right, we want to commission a working group, and that working group began to meet on for a period of time. We were even meeting monthly and even weekly, right? For a period of time. So we were working, we began to develop. We eventually got to the point where we formed a nonprofit, formed a board first, and we formed a nonprofit, got IRS approval. And that happened in 2021. And then in the fall of 2021, I began as the first full-time employee of OVC. And my colleague, now there are two of us. Kira Limbarakis is the other full-time employee. I serve as the CEO. Kira serves as the COO. And my first day of work was a very momentous day for OVC. And this is still part of the story of how we formed. So we were now, in 501c3. But my first day of work was in October the 4th. And Kira and I traveled she's in Boston, I'm in Pittsburgh. We met in DC, and we presented to the annual meeting of the Assembly of Bishops. I have never spoken to, I think there were 35 or 40 bishops there, and then a few more on Zoom. I've never spoken to that many bishops at one time. And so I was nervous. And yet we had prepared, and we shared the vision of OVC, and we were just grateful that the Assembly of Bishops overwhelmingly voted at that gathering to make OVC an official agency of the Assembly of Bishops. It was a deep honor, and it has been a very important landmark for us. So we continue developing. We had a public launch then in November, and since then we have been, thank God, on shows like this, which we are so grateful for. We have been active on our social media and really continuing to develop the program. And so I can talk more about the program in a bit, but that's a sketch of how it came to be.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the program. What is OVC? How would you explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would say to folks is that this is an intensive investment in young adults. It is a very purposeful say that if we as a church are going to thrive, right, we have got to make an investment in our young adults. And this is purposely a program that's focused on 21 to 29-year-olds. And we have done that because we want to complement what we believe is some tremendous work happening for folks who are in grade school, high school through the college years, right? That there's been tremendous effort in our church to support our youth, right? And there have been some really lovely efforts when our youth get to the 20s as well, but there are far fewer opportunities for folks in the 20s. And there are many other Christian traditions, right? And secular traditions who have created programs like Orthodox Volunteer Corps, right? But our tradition hasn't. And so we thought, this is really important for us, right? All right, so that's the first thing. It is an intensive investment in our young adults because we believe that they deserve that and our church needs it. That's the first thing. The second thing is think about what kind of investment is this, right? How are we making an investment? And this is an investment to help young adults be prepared to serve over the course of a lifetime, to be able to be servant leaders, right? With particular attention, with a particular mindset and a heartfelt concern for those among us who are suffering the most, right? We use the language of vulnerable communities, right? So we're going to try and train up a generation of folks who are faithful and effective in their service with vulnerable communities, right? How does that happen? How do we try to do that? There are 4 components to the work of OVC, and each of these pieces is connected to one another. They're linked in such a way that none of the pieces can really exist without the other. At the core of it is service. That's the first piece. And the way in which we approach this is that folks who participate in Orthodox Volunteer Corps will be connected to a nonprofit where they will work 4 days a week. That 4 days a week will happen for a 10-month span. And so folks are going to get a chance to really dig into that nonprofit, really understand how it works. They'll experience the ups and the downs of that nonprofit over those 10 months, right? We will find those placement partners, right, in each city in which we post up. And then we will do a matching process so that participants will have an opportunity to learn the nonprofit before they're matched, and the placement will have an opportunity to learn about the participant. So we'll make that match, and then the participant will work for 10 months at that nonprofit. Whenever we can, we're going to always have an Orthodox organization that is an anchor organization. So we're starting in Pittsburgh, and the Neighborhood Resilience Project is going to be our anchor organization there. So the Neighborhood Resilience Project is an organization that does trauma-informed community development in Pittsburgh, right? It's a beautiful ministry, right? And so we'll have 2 people who will be placed at the Neighborhood Resilience Project for that 10-month stint. But then we have other organizations that we're working with where other folks will be placed. And by the way, we will have in our first year 6 to 8 folks participating, right? And all right, so that's the first piece. There's this intensive opportunity to do service. We know that service is valuable. We know that young adults are hungry to serve, and we know it is a remarkable place to learn, excuse me, to learn about how a nonprofit runs, to learn about how you try to make change in a community, right? How you strengthen communities. So service is one part. The second part is formation. So it is not enough to simply provide young adults with an opportunity to serve. We want to also walk with young adults during this time and help them to deepen their faith, help them to get some really quality skill sets so they can serve effectively, not just during the year, but throughout their lives. So that work of formation has two main components. The first is formation within Orthodoxy, in the Orthodox faith, helping them to understand what is an Orthodox understanding of service, right? How can I serve in a manner that is consistent with my Orthodox faith? And what is that? And what is that? How does that, what does that mean for me? And what does that enable me to sort of bring to the table then when I am rooted in my Orthodox faith and service there? So that's one piece. The second piece is a robust leadership development curriculum. So again, when they serve, they are able to do so effectively, right? And I can talk about that piece as well. I think the quick thing I'll say here is that, understanding how communities function, understanding how organizations function, and then understanding how I operate, right? My skills and my talents, and my shortcomings, right? Understanding how all those things connect is the work of sort of leadership development, right? And I think it's actually very connected to our faith as well. I see parallels, or I see lots of points of connection there. Okay, so that's the second piece, formation. The third piece is community. We know the power of learning and living with others. We know the power of being in communion with one another, right? At a very fundamental level, right? I think our approach to services must be about this, right? About being in communion. And so we will have the participants live together in a house that we will provide. We will furnish it. And that place can become, we believe, a sacred space, right? A place where participants will eat together, will pray together, where they will study together, right? And they will experience and work through the challenges of being in communion with one another, right? And there will be other communities that will form over the course of the program, the community of the placement where they are, the community of the neighborhood, right? And then for sure the community of the church, right? And so church is the final pillar. It undergirds everything else that we do, right? As Orthodox Christians, how could we develop a program, right, like this without it being grounded in the church, in liturgy, right, in the rhythm that the church calendar provides for us? And so that those four pillars, right, of service, formation, community, and church form the essence of what Orthodox Volunteer Corps is.
Awesome. I want to remind everyone now, before I go on to my next question, that if you have questions for Michael, you can put them here in the chat on Zoom, and I'll also check our social media comments if you want to leave them there. But my next question is, how do you see OVC interacting with and complementing other church ministries?
Yes. So the first thing I'll say there is that from the very beginning, this has been an effort of so many different Orthodox entities. And so it has been a very unifying endeavor from the beginning. So I mentioned at that first meeting, right, that the Assembly of Bishops called, there were organizations from across the country. And so when we formed into a working group, there were folks, representatives from St. Basil Academy, from Project Mexico, from Crossroad, from the Neighborhood Resilience Project, from Focus North America. We had folks from OCF who were kept in the loop and we had, I'm sure I'm missing someone else, but it was OCMC from the very beginning. So it was just really beautiful, right? IOCC was kept in the loop. And so from the beginning, this has been just this beautiful joint effort. And now on our board, we have, a representative from a number of those, organizations that I mentioned, not all of them, but from a number of them. And on our advisory council as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is that since we've then sort of started, right, and really kind of got our feet on the ground, it's been beautiful how we've been able to work with other organizations. For example, this week, we're helping to co-lead a Real Break service week with OCF, Orthodox Christian Fellowship. And we would love, to continue that, over time. And that is actually also being done in cooperation with the Neighborhood Resilience Project. So, that's an example of a collaboration. Another sort of, collaboration and complement is, so OCF, right, does this beautiful investment, right, with college students and graduate students, right, and into the early 20s. And what we see as OVC as a beautiful stepping stone, right, for a student who has been engaged in college with OCF, right, and now wants an opportunity to take an even more intensive step into service and formation and leadership training, right, connected to, again, working with vulnerable communities. Take that next step, right, and so what we've done is we partnered with OCF when we did our recruitment, right? And we went to college conference, right? And had a table there. We actually had a nomination strategy that we used, and our partners at OCF and a whole bunch of other Orthodox organizations were just wonderful, right? So that's another example of a compliment. Still here, another one. We really, because church is one of the 4 pillars of this program, we really want to find ways of engaging our participants in the life of local parishes when they are in the program. And we've already begun to have discussions with local priests about this. And one of the conversations that came up is like, we've got to allow some, organic development there, right? We want to have freedom for the participants, right, to exercise their freedom to determine kind of exactly what gifts they can, bring to the table and how they will offer them. But then also, what is the particular parish need, right, and how can they and what can it offer to the participants? So, what we're trying to do there is create relationships, so that within those relationships, the offering, the mutual service back and forth between the participants and the parish can happen organically, right? I'm also going to be sharing with the Clergy Brotherhood in Pittsburgh, where we're starting later on this month, and there again, just building that relationship, building those ties. We think there's just some remarkable complementary work that can happen there. So one final example of complementary work. So I mentioned before that the participants will be at placements, right? And that's how the key way they will do their service over the course of the year. Focus North America, right, has work, right, in different parts of the country. And so as we expand other cities, right, we would love to have people placed at a focus center, right? And so we can provide then a young adult, right, who we've recruited, right, we've done the selection process. We will create the whole structure for that person. We provide, living situation for them, and we provide training for them, right? And then they do their service work, at a focus center, right? That's an example, right, of another. And we're doing that with the Neighborhood Resilience Project in Pittsburgh this next year. So just a number of ways in which we see great promise for being complementary to the wonderful Orthodox, programs that are happening.
So, Michael, we talked a little bit earlier. I read your bio earlier, talking about your background, but tell us a little bit more about your background and how it prepared you for your work now with OVC.
Yeah. When I think about that question, especially now, I really want to go back and tell a little bit about my parents. And And the reason I do that is, number one, because they bequeathed to me a heritage that shapes who I am, what I do, and so that's one of the reasons that I tell it. I also want to say something about my parents now, because my parents are aging, and my father actually just got out of the hospital. Thank God. He is on the mend, but his health is fragile, and my mom, in her own way, her health is fragile as well. And so there's a part of me that wants to tell their story now, to honor them, and I feel a certain tenderness to them as they're aging and fragile. Okay, so that's sort of the context here. My parents both grew up in rural Canada. They grew up in the Anabaptist tradition. I'm a convert to Orthodoxy as an adult. My mom grew up Amish. She was in a very rural area. It was so rural, right? So podunk that the place she grew up was literally called Punky Doodle's Corner. And it was where two dirt roads came together, right? And so they grew up in this milieu that was very isolated from cultural engagement. The Anabaptist tradition was one that at least at that point in time was very separated, from the broader culture. Formed this distinct community, right? That was operating under its own, norms. Dressed differently, didn't have cars, right? And so that's the milieu that they grew up. They when they after they met and married, my father got accepted into graduate school at Yale University. And so they moved to the United States. And they went from rural Canada, in my mom's case, an Amish community, to the center of sort of the academic world in the United States. They began to rub shoulders with people who would become senators and members of the House of Representatives. They began to rub shoulders with folks who would be business leaders in the next, generation. And it was a cultural shock for them, right? It was a heady time for them, but they stuck with it, right? And during that time, part of their education was not just sort of rubbing shoulders with the American elite, right? But it was also rubbing shoulders with a community that was I would argue, deeply oppressed, right? And it was the African American community in the United States. They rented an apartment in New Haven, Connecticut, from an African American couple, a working class couple, right? Who the husband, I think, had 2, maybe even 3 jobs. They were working really hard to kind of make ends meet, and they'd been able to buy this house, and they ended up renting out the second floor to my parents. There was an education on a number of different levels there for my folks living in that house, and one of them was after Martin Luther King Jr. was shot in 1968. At the time, I was in my mama's belly, and when he was shot, my parents watched the funeral with their landlords because my parents did not have a television. So they went downstairs and watched it with their landlords. And it was a powerful experience to see in this Black couple the pain of that funeral, to see the depth of the loss that they felt. And my parents felt it too, right? And they began to think about their own lives, right? How could their lives be lives of service? How could their lives be lives in which they help to grow the good in the world, right? And these folks who had been, very removed from sort of societal matters began to think maybe we have a part to play in that, to help to strengthen communities, right? So they started working at that. And they eventually moved to Philadelphia, and they did it in different ways. And I'll tell just one more story of my parents, and then I'll stop honoring them, and I'll get back to our topic here. But this is all relevant. It's all relevant, I believe. So the story is how my mom got involved in, again, trying to make the world a little bit better place, right? And seeing her work and indeed her faith being connected to that. So she got involved in an organization that was helping to improve the public school system. In Philadelphia, the public school system is struggling today, and it was struggling when I was coming up. I was a student in the public school system there, and my mom was a part of this group that was it was called Parents Union for Public Schools. And there was one year where there was a strike. The teachers had a strike. The Parents Union didn't take a position on like strikes. They weren't opposing them. They weren't whatever supporting them. That wasn't the point. But with this particular strike, they said it had gone on too long, right? And they really, for the sake of the kids, they wanted to get the two sides back to the bargaining table, the administration and the teachers, right? And so they did something dramatic to get these folks back to the bargaining table. They held a march in downtown Philadelphia around City Hall. If anybody knows Philadelphia, right? City Hall is right in the middle, right, of two huge thoroughfares, right? The thoroughfares connect at City Hall, and then they go in a circle around it, right? So it's the point is, it's a busy spot traffic wise. So it was basically moms, right? A bunch of moms got together, right? And they formed this parents union. So then they had this march, and they decided they were going to block traffic, right? I don't even think they knew that, how powerful it was going to be. But my mom, she's 5 foot tall, by the way, Amish girl, right? She goes out there and blocks traffic, and she has this bell, and she's ringing this bell, big bell to say, go back to school. And she's got a bullhorn, right? And they created a huge traffic jam, right? That image of my Amish mother, right? Blocking traffic because the most vulnerable among us, the children, needed somebody to speak on their behalf. That was a profound memory for me. I was there. I saw her doing that, right? Because I wasn't in school, right? They were on strike. So I was there and I saw her. And it meant a lot, to me. I want to carry on this tradition of standing with the most vulnerable, of working with the most vulnerable, in order to create a little bit better world. And I believe that this is fundamentally a part of our faith, right? It's powerfully expressed in a passage that's often used in this regard, right? But it's in Matthew, right? When Jesus says, right, when you feed the hungry, when you clothe the naked, when you visit those in prison, right, that you do it to me. I mean, that's a remarkable passage. I think this work of being with those who Jesus calls the least of these, right, the vulnerable, is a fundamental part of our faith. And of course, that's just one example, right? Again and again and again, Jesus spent time with those who people who others did not think were worthy, even children, right? When children came to him, children in Jesus' time were considered second-class citizens. They had a different notion of children than we do today. It was a radical move for him to say, let the children come to me, right? Or how, he honored women, like talking to the woman at the well, being with Samaritans who, deep animosity between Jews and Samaritans. I just again and again and again, lepers, right? Again and again, those who were just pushed to the side, who were considered less than. It's remarkable to see how Jesus was with them and helped us think of we have lenses, right, that we think of certain folks as just not being valuable, but Jesus kind of breaks that lens, right, when he shows us another way of seeing, and what a beautiful thing. Sorry, I got off. I'm gonna answer the question. So back to the question. All right. So then, what have I done? What has my work been, and how does that relate to OVC? Okay. So I did graduate work in history, and I studied urban history. I studied race relations, religion, and politics. That helped prepare me for working in cities. It helped prepare me for thinking about the role of faith. It also helped me to understand things like sort of race relations in cities, right? So I then went on and I worked, my first job was in Chicago, and I worked in an off-campus program that brought young adults to the city, right, for internships, for immersion in the city, and for working at like classes, to understand the city. That was not an Orthodox program. It was in another Christian tradition, and it was before I was Orthodox, but I was on the move to Orthodoxy at that point, right? I founded then another program in Pittsburgh that was modeled after that one, right? And I did that for a number of years. And there's sort of a longer story for how that program that I started, was called Pittsburgh Semester, fell apart. And it was a very difficult time for me. I learned a lot, I think, from that experience. And then I worked for about 13 years at a place called the Center for Civic Leadership, which was a nonprofit that did leadership development and community engagement. Got to know a ton of nonprofits throughout the city of Pittsburgh. It was an incredible education. And I worked with just incredible, students. Like these were folks who were graduates of universities. From Yale University to University of Southern California in the West, and folks who went on to do incredible things. And as I did that work, it became increasingly a desire of mine to offer like the high quality programming that I was blessed to be a part of at the Choral Center for Civic Leadership, right? And honestly, like folks I worked with, these are people who have gone on to, one of my former students was clerking for a Supreme Court justice recently, right? I mean, these folks have gone to do incredible things, right? They had high quality programming, and folks, Orthodox young adults deserve the same high quality work, right? Same high quality program. And so I'm so grateful to be able to now be just throwing myself into this work of OVC. All right, I'll stop now. Forgive me, Noel.
No, that was awesome. And I have so many follow-up questions now. I want to thank you for sharing about your parents. That was really inspiring. And I feel like I want to do a whole other program now about them. So first I'll kind of follow up to what you just said, which is, were there any other programs or initiatives that you saw that you really drew inspiration from when forming sort of the methods of OVC?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start with, where I was immediately before working at OVC. So at the Choral Center for Civic Leadership, one thing I learned was the power and the techniques of working with communities, as opposed to doing programs that are imposed upon communities. I was able to learn tools like asset-based community development, which was formed by folks in Chicago. And actually, when I was there, even I got to meet some of the folks who formed that work as a tool for learning, how to really discover and draw on the assets of a community, right? And one thing I'm going to say about this, like just that particular tool and that particular learning about working with communities, as opposed to imposing things on them, I believe that is actually there's an Orthodox notion of service that has some affinity with that idea, that I believe that goes deeper than the asset-based community development model. And the affinity is this, and I think it is about that service, as we understand service in Orthodoxy, it is about communion with others, right? And so, if we understand our life, right, all of our life as offering back to God that which God has given us, right? So of course the liturgy, right, is that celebration, right? And it is the material things of this world, right? But that become, the body and blood of Christ. So all of that, there is that work, right? Is a part of this notion of being in communion with others. So how could I do service then in some sort of distant way, right? How could I do service that would be not honoring, those human beings in front of me, but just sort of like doing something like to them that had no connection to their being, right? I couldn't, as an Orthodox Christian, right? I would be disconnected from my tradition, from myself, right? From what it means to be a human being, in relation to God and neighbor, right? So it's like some of these tools, that I was learning about and utilizing in a secular context. There's a deepening of some of those ideas, within Orthodoxy, right? And so I'm so excited about now being able to explore some of the depth there. All right, so I was drawing from some of the tools of leadership development in community engagement from there. I also the model of having 1 day a week in OVC, it's in formation, right? You could talk about it as a seminar, a very interactive seminar. Is another piece that I drew from from some of these other programs. So there's a lot of now. There's Jesuit Volunteer Corps, Lutheran Volunteer Corps, Episcopal Service Corps. There's a whole bunch of them. Quaker Voluntary Service. Most of those programs have 5 days a week in placement and almost no formation. There's a terrible, terrible loss there. Those are tremendous programs, but I believe there's a terrible loss when you don't have that full day a week for formation, for training, right? And so I drew that full day a week, right, in this interactive. Again, it was a seminar in my old job. We speak about it as more full kind of formation here. That's another piece that we drew. We are continually drawing on other programs in terms of just figuring out some of the logistics of how you run a program like this, right? And so that's been really beneficial at lots of different levels, and then just a community of people who have done this, and so learning from that community of people is sometimes about the logistics, but it's also about tell me your story, right? And how can I draw on that story and share with you mine as I do this work, which has been challenging at times and will be challenging at times. And so that's another thing I'm drawing.
I love that communal aspect you talked about, especially, I think we've all heard a lot of justified criticisms, right, of charity programs, of so-called development programs that are really not community-based, not respectful of the abilities, the assets, as you said, of the community, and not really listening, right? Not treating the people you're interacting with as equals. And I do think there's a unique opportunity from the Orthodox perspective. So thank you for sharing that. That's very inspiring.
Yes.
So what's the long-term vision for OVC?
Yes. So we are starting in Pittsburgh this fall. We will have our very first cohort there. And I should say we had a tremendous response in terms of applications. We have many more than we can take, thank God. It's going to mean some hard decisions, right? But we're in the midst of our recruitment. I should say we're in the midst of our selection process now. So we will have not more than 8 folks in the fall, but that's just the beginning. This is a national venture. We have our board of directors. We have folks from across the country. We have already received support from across the country, and we want to build this program across the country. And there are 2 ways we want to build over time. The first is we're starting with this full-time program, which is this 10-month immersion. So folks who participate in it, need to move from wherever they are and be in Pittsburgh and not do anything else for that 10 months, right? I mean, of course, you guys, it's not like you have time off, right? But this is your full-time endeavor. We also, however, want to start a part-time version of this, because we know there are young adults who will already be working full-time, already be, maybe in school full-time, but want to experience some of the curriculum, right? Want to experience some opportunity to serve, but can't do it in a full-time, way. So we really do want to build also this part-time program, and then connect the part-time and the full-time so that we can strengthen young adults to then really be on the forefront, the cutting edge of developing creative, innovative service initiatives, right? For other young adults and then for the church as a whole, right? Now that's a big vision, right? It's going to take time, but we really believe that that there's the potential, right, in our young adults to do that, and the hunger, right, to serve and to be creative in service. So we're going to build the part-time program. We will also then begin to expand to cities over time. And so we've got an initial 4-year plan about starting first with the full-time program in Pittsburgh, then developing the part-time program in Pittsburgh, then expanding to a second city. We probably think that would probably be Boston, but we're not sure yet for certain. And then where's the next city? And then where's the next city? We want to be strategic, and we want to be careful in that expansion. But we believe that if we develop something that is excellent, if we develop something that is faithful, if we develop something that is strategic, if we develop something that is really deeply connected to each community where we are grounded, and absolutely to the parishes in that community, that program will be something that must expand to other cities. And so that's our long-term vision.
It's exciting as well to imagine, the long-term impact, right? The next generation of young people being really equipped to carry out these service initiatives in some capacity for the rest of their lives, and leading the church in that way.
Yes.
That's very exciting.
Forgive me, just you saying that reminded me, I want to say one more thing about that longer term vision. And that is that, so we have this motto: prepare for a year, serve for a lifetime, right? I'm sorry, serve for a year, prepare for a lifetime. And what's so important about that is that if we can over time develop cohorts in other cities, right? And then our vision is if we can connect them to one another, right? So that they're sharing their ideas, they're sharing their visions, of service. And then if we can develop a robust alumni community that does the same kind of sharing, right? That does the same kind of support, right? That then we really will make good on that they won't just serve for a year, but they really will be prepared to serve for a lifetime, right? We're just excited about that.
So I want to make sure people know how they can get involved. I guess I'll ask in two parts. First, people that are interested in applying for future programs, what are the qualifications? How can they sort of start to think now about potentially applying? And then for everyone else, how can they support OVC?
Wonderful. First, if you are a young adult between 21 and 29 years old, right? Or you're a little younger than that and you're sort of looking forward to those years, check out our website, right? orthodoxvolunteercorps.org, right? And CORPS is core, orthodoxvolunteercorps.org. So that's the first thing. On the website, there's, description of the program, the different, 4 components of the work. And we have our application is online. We just finished our recruitment cycle for this next year, but we will open that up again. And actually it's open now. One could apply now, but we're not going to be, reviewing applications for quite a while. But the second thing you could do is on there is a place to sign up for just getting more information, right? You may not be ready to apply, but you still want to get on our mailing list. We'll then stay in touch with you. We'll let you know, right, when we're doing info sessions, which we did some, we did ones in December and January and February, and then we'll do more sessions. We'll probably do some in the fall, and then also in the early winter. So sign up there. And then secondly, our email addresses are on there. Feel free to reach out to us, if there are particular questions. Kira's email address and my email address. So that's one thing for folks who are interested in the program. For everyone else, there are a number of ways in which you can support us. The first and most important is please pray for us. And when I took on this job, and moved from the work that I was doing in a secular organization to this work, which is a sacred work, right? I've had this sense of the responsibility I've got now is deeper, right? It's more weighty, and it makes me nervous from time to time, right? Like, I know I can't do this. I cannot do this on my own, right? And so I'd be grateful. I would be grateful for your prayers. And not just for me, but for my colleagues, not just for my colleagues, but for our board, not just for our board, but for the participants, not just the participants, for the communities with whom they will be serving, right? The whole endeavor, it must be bathed in prayer, and I'd be grateful for that. Second thing you can do is share the word. We are a new organization. We're doing everything we can to just tell folks about it. Please share the word. Share the word with your priest. Share the word with your friends. Share the word with organizations that you're involved with. Share the word with young people that you know. We'd be grateful, right, for that. And then the third thing you do is you can support us financially, and you can do that on our website, online, and we'd be grateful for any form of support.
All right. Well, we are coming up to the end of our time. Thank you very much again, Michael, for being with us today. I will give you the opportunity to say any final words you'd like to say or let people know about the program, and then I'll close us out with some announcements.
I think the only thing I would like to say is, Noelle, I'm so grateful to you and to OCN for giving me the opportunity to share about OVC, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the warm welcome.
Thank you very much for being with us, and I know we'll have you back again. I have more questions, and I can't wait to hear more about the program. So I will add Orthodox Volunteer Corps, if it's not already. I'll add all the links on our website and on our social media so people can find that information that you mentioned. So I will close our program out with a closing prayer, and then I will just have a few brief announcements. Lord, now let your servants depart in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all people, a light to enlighten the Gentiles and the glory of your people, Israel. So just a few announcements. As always, if you want to see the full list of programs, you can go to our website under programs and see everything that's coming up. And you can also find our community calendar on the website. I'll just mention a few. If you missed it, we had our first Path to the Priesthood program on Monday. That is now available on our social media and on our website. That is a program where our new host, Pristo, talks to young priests and deacons about their journey to the priesthood and what inspired them to go to seminary and things like that. So we had a really interesting first episode, and look out for the next episode in 2 weeks. And if you missed it, you can watch that episode now on all of our social media, or Facebook and YouTube, and also on our website. Upcoming programs, we have, of course, all of our Tuesday and Sunday Bible studies from Ascension Cathedral. Next week, Armed with Faith will be back from its hiatus, our program with Father Gary Kyriakou, and we will be interviewing Carrie Kampakis, who is an author of books for young adults and for mothers as well. So that will be a very interesting program. You can find the information on our website. And also our next edition of Orthodoxy Now magazine is in the process of being completed, and that will be out, I believe, next week, just before or just at the start of Great Lent. So as always, you can find all of our articles, all of the information at myocn.net, and you can follow us on all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, to keep abreast of all of our upcoming programs. So thank you again to everyone. Thank you to our board. Thank you to our guest again, Michael, and stay safe, everyone. Keep the faith alive in you and your home. Remember to always have faith in what you listen to and watch. You can support MyOCN if able, financially, or again, through your prayers and through sharing our programs with your friends and family. MyOCN is the wind in the wings of the angels that carries the message of peace and love to the world. Join the effort and become a guardian of our faith. And remember that the OCN is here for you and your family any day, anytime, anywhere. So we're looking forward to seeing you all next week and in our other programs throughout the week. And everyone stay safe and have a great night.